The desert night swallowed sound. Iraqi sands stretched endless under a moonless sky February 1991, 48 hours before the ground war would begin. The kind of darkness that made men question what they could trust, what they could see, what they thought they knew about the world. Lieutenant Rachel Garrett crouched behind a berm of sand and broken concrete, her small frame nearly invisible in the shadows. 22 years old, 5'3", in boots, blonde hair tucked under a black watch cap, blue eyes scanning the compound through night vision goggles that painted everything in shades of green ghostlight. Behind her, 8 Navy SEALs waited in tactical spacing. Ahead, the target, a suspected Scud missile storage facility, concrete buildings rising from desert floor like broken teeth against the star-scattered sky. Intelligence said, mobile launchers. Strike them before they could rain terror on Allied forces pushing north toward Kuwait City. Rachel had studied the satellite imagery for 72 hours straight, had memorized every shadow, every angle, every detail that didn't quite fit the pattern, and one detail screamed wrong louder than all the others. Contact in 2 minutes, came the whisper through her headset. Commander Nathaniel Hardwick, 6'2" of Annapolis confidence and 15 years of successful operations. The kind of officer who'd never lost a mission, never questioned his instincts, never had reason to doubt the intelligence pipeline that fed him targets and timelines. Rachel keyed her mic. Low, urgent. Sir, request hold position. Something's not matching the brief. Static crackled. Then Hardwick's voice edged with impatience. Elaborate, Garrett. She pulled the satellite photos from her vest pocket. Even in darkness, even through NVGs, the discrepancy was obvious if you knew what to look for. The ventilation configuration. These aren't standard Scud storage specs. The air exchange rate is triple what you'd need for conventional warheads. Your assessment, Rachel's mouth went dry. This was the moment. The choice between staying quiet and staying safe or speaking truth and risking everything. She'd made this choice before. In training, in simulation. But never with lives hanging in the balance, never with a commander who had more deployments than she had years in service. Chemical weapons, sir. VX nerve agent based on the ventilation profile. If we breach through the main entrance as planned, we trigger whatever dispersion system they have rigged. The whole team gets exposed. Silence on the radio. Long enough that Rachel wondered if her transmission had failed. Then Hardwick's voice, colder now. Garrett, stick to your job. We have solid intel from CENTCOM, Scud missiles, conventional warheads. We breach in 90 seconds. Get in position. Rachel's hand tightened on her rifle. Every instinct screamed that she was right. The numbers didn't lie. The ventilation specs didn't lie. But she was a lieutenant facing a commander, a woman with 2 years of field experience facing a man who'd been doing this since before she was born. She keyed her mic one more time. Sir, I have photographic evidence of C4 placement at 3 entry points. The building is rigged. If we go through the front... That's enough, Lieutenant. Hardwick's voice carried the weight of final decisions of orders that would not be questioned again. We've been planning this operation for 3 weeks. The entry points are solid. We proceed as briefed. Move to your position. Now. Rachel held the radio longer than she should have. Wanted to argue. Wanted to lay out every piece of evidence that showed the compound was a trap designed to kill anyone who entered it, exactly the way Hardwick planned to enter. But the chain of command was clear. The order was given. She moved to her position, third in the breach sequence designated to provide cover as the team entered the main structure. Around her, the other 7 SEALs flowed into formation with practiced silence. Good men. Men who trusted their commander. Men who had no reason to doubt the intelligence that said this was a simple strike and extract. Men who were about to die if she was right. Hardwick raised his fist. 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2. Rachel touched the small locket under her body armor. Inside, a photo of a 6-year-old girl with red hair and green eyes. A daughter she'd had at 16, raised by Rachel's mother while Rachel joined the Navy at 18, fought her way through buds at 19, proved herself in Grenada and Panama. A daughter who barely knew her mother except through letters and rare phone calls, and the promise that someday when the deployment slowed down, they'd have real time together. 1 finger. The shaped charges blew. Door disintegrated into splinters and smoke. Team flowed through the breach with textbook precision rifles, up clearing corners, calling out sectors. And then the world became screaming. The secondary explosives detonated exactly as Rachel had predicted, exactly where she'd identified the C4 placement in the satellite imagery that no one else had bothered to study closely enough. The building didn't collapse, it vented, a daisy chain of charges designed not to destroy, but to disperse, to aerosolize, to turn the entire compound into a chemical kill zone. VX nerve agent, colorless, odorless, lethal in doses measured in milligrams, faster than sarin, more persistent than mustard gas, stable enough to remain active for weeks in the right conditions. The kind of weapon that violated every international convention, every rule of warfare that civilized nations pretended to follow. The kind of weapon Iraq wasn't supposed to have. Rachel saw the first SEAL go down, convulsions. The distinctive jerking that meant the agent was attacking his nervous system, overloading every signal, turning his own body into an enemy he couldn't fight. She knew the symptoms from endless training drills, from classified briefings about worst-case scenarios that weren't supposed to happen in real combat. She was moving before conscious thought. Gas mask already in place, atropine injector in hand, pulling men backward out of the kill zone. 1, 2, 3. Getting them clear of the visible vapor cloud that marked the highest concentration. Hardwick was furthest in. He'd taken point, led the breach personally, because that's what commanders did in his generation. That's what separated officers who led from behind desks from officers who earned respect in the field. But his confidence had put him deepest in the compound when the VX dispersed, and now he was down crawling, trying to reach the exit while his muscles locked up and his lungs forgot how to pull air. Rachel went after him. Every survival instinct screamed to run the other direction. Her training said, "Leave him, save yourself. Contamination spreads through contact with exposed individuals." But something deeper than training, deeper than self-preservation, pushed her forward into the chemical fog. She grabbed Hardwick under the arms, dragged him through sand and debris and the bodies of men who'd been alive 30 seconds ago. Her mask was filtering the air, her injected atropine was buying time against absorption through skin contact, but she could feel the agent working anyway. Numbness in her fingers. Vision starting to tunnel. The first whispers of the paralysis that would shut down breathing, stop the heart and everything in minutes of choking helplessness. She got Hardwick to clean air, administered his atropine injector, started chest compressions because his heart had stopped, because VX didn't care about rank or experience or the 15 successful deployments that made him believe he was untouchable. Around her, the other SEALs were rallying. The ones she'd pulled out first were recovering training, taking over starting triage on the ones still down. Medical evac was inbound, rotors already audible in the distant Saudi-based trauma team with chemical exposure protocols and every cutting-edge treatment that might save lives. Rachel kept compressions going, 30 to the chest, 2 rescue breaths through the mask valve, 30 more. Her arms were going numb, her own breathing was labored. The atropine was wearing off and she hadn't saved a second dose for herself because there were 8 men down and only 9 injectors. And she'd made the calculation that her life wasn't worth more than theirs. Hardwick's heart restarted. Weak, irregular, but beating. He gasped against the mask she'd fitted to his face. His eyes found hers through the fog of chemical exposure and shock, and the realization of how close he'd just come to dying because he wouldn't listen to a 22-year-old woman who'd read the intelligence better than he had. He tried to speak, couldn't manage words yet. Rachel leaned close. "You were right," he whispered, blood on his lips from the violent convulsions. "Chemical weapons, just like you said." Rachel nodded, didn't waste breath on vindication or anger. Just focused on keeping him breathing until the medevac landed. The helicopter touched down. Medics swarmed with stretchers and decontamination gear. They took the worst cases at first, loading them into the bird with practiced efficiency. Hardwick was third aboard, still conscious, still watching Rachel, with eyes that held something between gratitude and shame. The bird lifted. Another landed to take the remaining casualties. Rachel waited on the sand, making sure every SEAL was loaded before she took a spot. That's what junior officers did. Last on, last off, making sure the team came first. She was climbing toward the helicopter door when her legs gave out. The delayed VX exposure had been working through her system while she'd focused on everyone else. Now it hit with the force of betrayed biology. Muscles locked, breathing stopped, heart stuttered. The last thing Rachel Garrett saw was desert stars. The last thing she thought about was a 6-year-old girl with red hair who would grow up without a mother. The last thing she felt was regret, not for speaking up, but for not speaking up loud enough, hard enough, insistently enough to make them listen before men died for someone else's arrogance. She died on that helicopter 17 minutes later. Not from the VX alone, but from having used her single dose of atropine on Hardwick instead of herself. A choice she made consciously, deliberately, because she'd been raised to believe that rank earned in the field deserved respect, even when rank abused in planning deserved contempt. 5 men survived that mission because Rachel Garrett pulled them out of the chemical fog. 3 men died despite everything she did, and one commander lived who should have died, who would spend the next 37 years knowing that a woman half his age had been right and he'd been wrong, and his ego had killed better people than he deserved to command. 12,000 miles away in a small house in San Diego, a 6-year-old girl with red hair sat on a couch between her grandmother's arms and watched CNN coverage of Operation Desert Storm. The news didn't say names yet, didn't identify casualties, but something in the grandmother's sudden stillness in the way her grip tightened on Elena's small shoulders told a story before words could form. "Is Mommy okay?" Elena asked in the particular voice children use when they already know the answer but desperately need adults to lie convincingly. The grandmother's silence was answer enough. 2 days later, a Navy chaplain arrived with condolence letters and a folded flag and words about sacrifice and service that meant nothing to a child who just wanted her mother to come home. Later would come the medal ceremony, the Silver Star for extraordinary heroism, the citation that praised Rachel Garrett's bravery under fire, her selfless rescue of teammates, her ultimate sacrifice in service to her nation. What the citation didn't mention that she'd been right about the chemical weapons, that she'd warned her commander and been ignored, that she'd died saving the life of a man whose arrogance had killed her and 3 others. That truth would remain classified for 37 years, buried under top-secret, sensitive, compartmented information restrictions. Locked away because admitting Iraq had VX weapons would have complicated the narrative, created international incidents, raised questions about intelligence failures that were easier left unasked. Rachel Garrett's file said, equipment failure, cause of death, exposure during combat operations. Nothing about being right. Nothing about being ignored. Nothing that would suggest the Navy had any responsibility beyond bad luck in the fortunes of war. Elena grew up knowing her mother was a hero. That was true. What she didn't know was that her mother was a prophet whose prophecies no one believed until bodies proved the vision. That truth would wait 37 years to surface, but truth has patience. Truth can wait. Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, Spring 2028, 37 years after Desert Storm. Commander Elena Cross stood at her mother's grave for the first time in 6 months. 43 years old now, though people usually guess mid-30s. 5'2", inheriting her mother's small frame, but her father's red hair and green eyes and the kind of pale skin that showed every emotion in the form of freckles that darkened when she was angry or embarrassed or fighting tears she refused to let fall. 18 years Navy, 11 years as a SEAL. One of 7 women who'd completed BUDS training in the 2 decades since it had officially opened to female candidates. Currently assigned to WARCOM strategic planning, which meant a desk job in San Diego, and enough security clearances to know secrets that would never make headlines. She wore civilian clothes today, jeans and a Navy sweatshirt, no rank insignia, nothing that would draw attention. But she stood with the particular posture that marked military bearing even in casual dress. Weight balanced evenly, spine straight, without being rigid awareness of surroundings that came from too many years in places where relaxing meant dying. The headstone was simple. Name, rank, dates of service, dates of life cut short. Died in service to her nation, because that was the phrase they used when the real story couldn't be told. Elena knelt, traced her fingers over the carved letters. She'd been too young to remember her mother beyond fragments. The smell of gun oil and sunscreen, strong arms lifting her for hugs before deployments. A laugh that came easy and often, but those memories felt borrowed, somehow assembled from photographs in her grandmother's stories rather than genuine recollection. What she knew for certain, her mother had been right about something, and being right had killed her. "I'm going to find out what they buried," Elena said quietly to the stone. Not praying exactly. Her faith had eroded somewhere between her 3rd deployment and watching friends die for reasons that looked less noble in classified after-action reports than they did in public memorials. But she spoke anyway because some conversations demanded witness, even if only Granite could hear. "I'm going to make them tell the truth about what you saw, what you warned them about, why you died." She'd be proud of that. Elena spun, hand instinctively moving toward a weapon she wasn't carrying. A man stood 3 graves back, appearing from nowhere, with the particular silence that marked special operations training. Late 60s, maybe 70. Built like weathered oak, still carrying the fitness that came from a lifetime of pushing physical limits. Salt and pepper hair cut military short. Eyes that had seen things they'd never fully forget. Master Chief Vincent Thorne. The name surfaced from Elena's memory before he spoke. She'd seen his file during her initial SEAL training, studied the legendary operators who'd paved the path she walked. Grenada, 83, Panama, 89, First Gulf War, Somalia, 93. 20 more years of classified operations that left gaps in his service record where missions existed that couldn't be acknowledged. Retired now, supposedly. But men like Thorne didn't really retire. They just moved to different kinds of warfare. Senior Chief, Elena said, defaulting to the respect his rank had earned, even in retirement. Commander. Thorne's voice carried the gravel of too many years breathing bad air in worse places. Or should I say Lieutenant Commander Cross? Your last promotion was 3 months ago. Congratulations. Elena's guard went up. Retired operators didn't show up at random graves with detailed knowledge of current personnel assignments. Do I know you? You don't, but I knew your mother. Thorne moved closer, slow enough to signal peaceful intent. Rachel Garrett saved my life. Twice, actually. Once in Grenada when I was a brand new chief and she was an even newer SEAL candidate proving herself in the field. Second time in Desert Storm when she pulled me out of that compound before the VX could finish shutting down my nervous system. Elena's breath caught. VX. Chemical weapons. That detail had never appeared in any official report she'd been able to access. The official record says equipment failure. The official record is horseshit. Thorne stopped at a respectful distance. Your mother identified VX warheads through satellite analysis. Warned her commander. Got ignored. Died saving men who should have listened to her in the first place. And you know this how? Thorne reached into his jacket. Moved slow, showing his hands, giving Elena time to see he was pulling out nothing more dangerous than a USB drive. I was there. I survived. And I spent the next 37 years collecting evidence that proves what really happened. Documents they buried under TSCI classification. Witness statements from team members who knew the truth but got ordered to shut up. Chemical analysis from the samples they took from that compound and then locked away. He held out the drive. Everything that proves Rachel Garrett was right. Everything that proves Commander Nathaniel Hardwick, now Major General Hardwick, falsified his after-action report to cover up his mistake. Everything that shows your mother's death wasn't heroic sacrifice, but command negligence dressed up in medals and silence. Elena stared at the drive. 37 years of buried truth compressed into a piece of plastic and silicon. The kind of evidence that could destroy careers, trigger investigations, rewrite history books. The kind of evidence that could also get people killed for possessing it. Why give this to me, she asked. Because 3 months ago, a female Navy intelligence officer named Captain Sarah Brennan warned her commander about an IED network in Syria. He ignored her. She died when her convoy hit the exact route she'd flagged as compromised. Her commander was Colonel Marcus Donovan, trained and mentored by your mother's killer. Same pattern, same result. Different war, different decade, same fucking arrogance getting women killed. Thorne's jaw clenched. I was a chief petty officer in 1991. Hardwick was a commander. I had no rank to fight him, no leverage to make anyone listen when I tried to report what really happened. But now I'm a retired master chief with nothing to lose. And you're a lieutenant commander with the skills to do something about it. Do what exactly? Prove the pattern exists. Prove it's systemic, not individual. Prove that when men in command positions ignore women's tactical intelligence, people die. Make enough noise that the Navy can't bury it again. Elena took the USB drive, heavy for something so small like it carried more than data. This is classified material. Possessing it is a felony. So is falsifying official reports. So is negligent homicide. So is covering up war crimes. Thorne met her eyes. Your mother made me promise something before that last deployment. She said if anything happened to her, I should make sure her daughter knew the truth about what she'd seen, what she'd warned about why she died. I'm 37 years late keeping that promise, but I'm keeping it now. Before Elena could respond, another voice cut across the cemetery. Commander Cross, Senior Chief Thorne, how fortuitous that you're both here. They turned. A man in Navy dress blues approached Captain's Eagles on his collar ribbons indicating desk command rather than field operations. Captain Diana Foster, Warcom Administrative Liaison, the kind of officer who showed up when situations needed managing rather than solving. Behind Foster, barely visible in the tree line, Elena spotted 2 figures in civilian clothes with the particular wariness that marks security details. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a prepared interception. Captain, Elena acknowledged. I have a message from Admiral Bennett, Foster said. He requests your presence at a classified briefing. Both of you, immediately. Elena glanced at Thorne. The old SEAL's expression showed no surprise, which meant he'd been expecting this. Had probably arranged it. "What's the briefing about?" Elena asked. Foster's smile was thin. "A mission that will either honor your mother's legacy or destroy your career. Admiral Bennett will explain. Transportation is waiting." She turned without waiting for confirmation they'd follow. The security detail fell into flanking positions. Not threatening exactly, but making clear that refusal wasn't really an option. Thorne started walking. Elena followed USB drive, feeling heavier in her pocket with each step. 37 years of buried truth. A pattern of dead women and protected commanders, and now a mission that could honor or destroy. She touched the locket she wore under her sweatshirt, inside the same photo her mother had carried. 6-year-old Elena with red hair and green eyes smiling at a camera with the particular joy of children who haven't yet learned that sometimes the people you love don't come home. "I'm going to need more information before I commit to anything," Elena said to Thorne's back. "You'll get it." Thorne didn't slow his pace. "But Commander, your mother spent her whole career being ignored because men thought her size and gender meant her intelligence didn't matter. Now you have a chance to prove they were wrong. Not just about her, about every woman they've dismissed. You really going to walk away from that?" Elena didn't answer, but she kept walking toward whatever mission waited. Because Thorne was right, because her mother had died being right and no one listening. Because somewhere in Syria, Sarah Brennan had died the same way, and the pattern was too clear to ignore. Because some truths demanded more than acknowledgement. They demanded action. The briefing took place in a skiff buried 3 levels below a nondescript office building in downtown San Diego. Sensitive compartmented information facility designed to prevent electronic surveillance, equipped with white noise generators and Faraday cage construction, and enough security protocols to make visiting feel like entering a bank vault. Admiral Thomas Bennett sat at the head of the conference table. 62 years old, still carrying the lean build of someone who'd spent 40 years in special operations before accepting flag rank. His chest held ribbons from conflicts most Americans had forgotten in countries they couldn't find on a map. The kind of admiral who'd earned respect in the field before learning to navigate Pentagon politics. Elena and Thorne sat across from him. Foster remained standing, tablet in hand, ready to document whatever agreements or refusals followed. Commander Cross Bennett began without preamble. "You're here because someone thinks you're the right person to fix a problem the Navy has been ignoring for 3 decades. I'm not entirely convinced they're right, but I'm willing to be persuaded. So let's start with this. What do you know about institutional bias in tactical intelligence assessment?" "I know it exists," Elena said carefully. "I know female officers report being dismissed or overridden at higher rates than male counterparts with equivalent rank and experience. I know the data supports systematic patterns in how recommendations from women get weighted versus identical recommendations from men." "And how do you know that?" "Because I've lived it, sir. Because I've watched it happen to others. Because ignoring patterns makes you complicit in perpetuating them." Bennett nodded. "Good answer. Now here's what you don't know. 3 days ago, the Pentagon Inspector General opened a formal investigation into Colonel Marcus Donovan regarding Captain Sarah Brennan's death in Syria. They're examining whether he showed a pattern of dismissing intelligence from female officers across multiple deployments. Iraq 2015, Syria 2018, Syria 2020. 3 female intel officers, 3 warnings that got ignored, 3 preventable deaths. He pulled up a classified slide on the wall screen. Photos of 3 women in uniform, service dates, deployment records, causes of death. The IG wants to prove systemic failure. The problem is, they can't. Donovan's a protege of Major General Nathaniel Hardwick, who sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee's favorite witness list. Hardwick has Senator Bradford protecting him, and Bradford has enough juice to bury investigations that make the Navy look bad. So you need evidence that goes beyond Donovan. Elena said, "You need to prove the pattern starts with Hardwick." "We need to prove the whole system is broken," Bennett corrected. "That it's not one bad commander or 3 unfortunate incidents. That there's institutional bias affecting tactical decision-making at every level. And we need proof solid enough that even Bradford can't bury it." He looked directly at Elena. "Your mother was right about VX weapons in Iraq." Hardwick ignored her. "She died, he falsified the report, the Navy classified everything to avoid international complications. That's the foundation case that proves the pattern existed 37 years ago. What we need now is current evidence showing it still exists." Thorne leaned forward. "You want Commander Cross to go undercover." "SEAL preparatory training at Coronado," Bennett confirmed. "New recruit class starts in 4 days. 25 candidates. Commander Cross enrolls as a basic trainee, submits to the same evaluation process as everyone else. We document every assumption, every assessment, every instance where her performance gets measured against expectations based on appearance rather than capability. Elena's mind raced through implications. You want me to hide my rank and experience? See how long it takes for demonstrated competence to override initial bias? Exactly. And we document everything. Body cameras recorded evaluations, timestamped performance metrics, quantifiable data showing how long bias persists despite contrary evidence. Then we use that current proof combined with Thorne's historical evidence to show the pattern is systemic, institutional, ongoing. Enough to force real reforms instead of cosmetic gestures. What about Hardwick, Elena asked. If he finds out I'm Rachel Garrett's daughter conducting this investigation, he'll try to shut it down, Bennett said bluntly, which is why you'll be operating under your father's surname, why your service record won't be available to training staff, why only 3 people in the entire Navy will know your real identity. 3, myself, Captain Foster, and Senior Chief Thorne, who'll be on site as an observer attached to Training Command. Bennett's expression hardened. Commander, I'm not going to pretend this is safe. If Hardwick discovers what you're doing, he has the power and connections to destroy your career. If training staff figure out you're SEAL qualified before we've gathered enough evidence, the data becomes contaminated. And if you fail to perform at the level necessary to prove competence transcends appearance, he let that hang. The implications were clear. Failure meant more than a blown operation. It meant validating the biases they were trying to disprove. But if you succeed, Bennett continued, you give us leverage to make real changes. New assessment protocols, blind evaluation standards, review of every mission where female officers' intelligence was overridden. Your mother's true cause of death officially recognized. Real reforms actually implemented instead of just announced and forgotten. Elena looked at Thorne. The old SEAL's face showed nothing, but his eyes held something that might have been hope, or might have been the desperate faith of someone who'd carried guilt for 37 years and finally saw a chance at redemption. She thought about her mother. 22 years old and right about chemical weapons and dead because men with more rank had more certainty than evidence. Thought about Sarah Brennan warning about IEDs and dying in the exact ambush she'd predicted. Thought about every woman who'd been dismissed as overcautious or emotional or not suited for tactical command because their assessments didn't match the assumptions of men who couldn't imagine being wrong. I'll do it, Elena said, on one condition. Bennett raised an eyebrow, which is, if we're going to prove the pattern, we do it completely, not just current bias, everything. I want my mother's classified records declassified. I want the truth about Desert Storm made public. I want Hardwick's falsified report exposed. All of it. That's asking for court-martial of a 4-star general with 30 years of protected connections. That's asking for justice. Elena's voice was quiet steel. My mother died being right. She deserves people knowing she was right. Not in classified files that stay buried for another 3 decades. In public, on record, acknowledged. Bennett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. If we get enough evidence to make the case stick, I'll push for full disclosure. Can't guarantee it happens, but I'll spend every favor I've earned making it possible. Deal? Deal. Then you start in 72 hours. Thorne will brief you on cover story details. Foster will handle documentation and equipment. And Commander, Bennett's expression softened slightly. Your mother would be proud. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because you're seeking truth. That's what she did. That's what got her killed. And that's what we're going to make sure meant something. Coronado Naval Base. 4 days later. Morning sun burning through coastal fog, turning everything golden and hazy. The bus carrying 25 SEAL prep candidates rolled through the main gate past guard towers and chain-link fence, and the endless expanse of Pacific Ocean stretching toward horizons that promised testing and transformation in equal measure. Elena sat 3 rows from the back, wearing fatigues, 3 sizes too large boots that felt like boats on her small feet, hair pulled back in regulation bun. She'd spent the last 72 hours shedding every marker of rank and experience, learning to move without the unconscious precision of 11 years as an operator, practicing expressions of uncertainty instead of command presence, becoming invisible in the way that let people see what they expected rather than what existed. The recruits around her were standard demographic. Early 20s mostly, though a few pushed 30. Former college athletes trying to prove themselves in bigger arenas. Working-class kids seeking structure and purpose. The occasional military legacy chasing family tradition. All of them carrying dreams of becoming elite warriors, most of them completely unaware of what they just volunteered to endure. 3 seats ahead, a massive figure dominated the aisle. Garrett Wolfe, 24, former University of Michigan linebacker, with shoulders that barely fit through standard doorways. 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle, built through years of weight rooms and protein shakes, and the particular genetics that made football coaches see dollar signs. "Look at that tiny thing," Garrett said, loud enough for half the bus to hear. "She looks like she's wearing her big brother's uniform. What is she, 16? Laughter rippled through recruits. Not cruel exactly, just the casual mockery of men testing boundaries, establishing hierarchy, figuring out who belonged and who didn't. Elena kept her face toward the window. Inside, muscle memory wanted to respond with the verbal precision that could deconstruct egos in 3 sentences. Training whispered tactical assessments. Garrett was compensating for something, probably family pressure given the linebacker to SEAL pipeline. His mockery was defensive posturing before anyone could question whether football fitness translated to operator capability. But she said nothing. Let the laughter wash over her. Let them underestimate. Let the assumptions form that she'd spend the next week systematically destroying. The bus pulled into the training facility parking lot. Buildings spread in neat rows, parade grounds, and obstacle courses visible between structures. In the distance, the Pacific rolled eternal and indifferent to human struggles playing out on its shores. Master Chief William Kane stood waiting, a man carved from granite in hard decisions. 50 years old, 26 years. Navy face weathered by sun and salt, and the particular stress of turning civilians into warriors. He'd served in Desert Storm, though he'd been stationed with a different SEAL team than Rachel's. Didn't know Elena's mother personally wouldn't recognize the genetic echo standing before him. "Off the bus!" Kane's voice carried like thunder across concrete. 2 lines, alphabetical order. Move with purpose. Recruits scrambled to comply. Elena moved with them, neither first nor last, just another body in the crowd. But Kane's eyes found her immediately. His expression shifted through micro-movements, confusion, concern, something that might have been sympathy. The look that said, "You're in the wrong place." The look that said, "Someone made a mistake." The look that said, "Sweetheart, the admin building is that way." Kane paced along the line, studying each recruit with jeweler's intensity, examining diamonds for flaws. When he reached Elena, he stopped, studied her from boots to bun, taking in the oversized fatigues, the small frame swimming in fabric, meant for someone twice her size. "Miss," he said, voice almost gentle, "are you certain you're in the correct program?" 24 pairs of eyes turned to watch. Some curious, some amused, some already dismissive. Elena met Kane's gaze and held it. "Yes, Master Chief. SEAL preparatory training is extremely demanding, physically, mentally, emotionally. There are other programs that might be more appropriate for someone of your—" He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "Stature. I'm aware of the requirements, Master Chief. I'm here for SEAL prep." Something flickered in Kane's eyes. Respect, maybe, or frustration, or the particular weariness of someone who knew he was about to watch someone get hurt and couldn't stop it. He nodded once, sharp and final, and continued down the line. The processing took 2 hours. Medical checks, gear issue, barracks assignment, endless paperwork transforming humans into numbers, and numbers into data points tracking progress or failure. The supply sergeant looked at Elena's measurements and sighed like a man and asked to fit an ocean into a teacup. "Smallest we have," he said, handing over fatigues that would need rolling at cuffs and belting tight at waist. "You sure about this?" "Yes, Sergeant. Your funeral." But not unkindly. Barracks B housed 20 recruits in a long room lined with metal bunks and wall lockers. Elena was assigned lower bunk near the back, next to a tall woman who moved with a particular awareness of someone trained to assess threats. "Isabella Stone," the woman said, extending a hand. "Call me Bella. Former Boston PD. Elena Brennan." The handshake was brief, professional. Bella's grip tested slightly. Elena matched it exactly, no more, no less. "No offense," Bella said, studying Elena with detective's eyes, "but you look like you should be in college, not here." "So I've been told." "This isn't discouragement, just realistic. Physical standards are brutal. Dropout rate is insane. I say this as someone who's done police academy SWAT training, tactical response. This is different." Elena began unpacking her gear with movements that were precise, practice, military perfect. Each item went into her wall locker in exactly the right place. Socks folded in thirds, shirts pressed flat with collars aligned, boots lined heel to heel with laces tucked inside. Bella watched this display with growing interest. The speed was notable, the accuracy more so, but what caught attention was the automatic nature of it. This wasn't someone who'd been taught recently. This was muscle memory worn smooth by years of repetition. "Where'd you serve?" Bella asked quietly. "I haven't. Not yet." "Right." Bella's tone said she didn't believe it for a second but wouldn't push. Not yet. The mess hall at 1800 hours was a study in nervous energy and false bravado. Long tables filled with recruits who talked too loud about backgrounds and motivations and absolute certainty they'd be among the graduates. Elena took her tray to a corner table, choosing a seat that gave her view of the entire room. Old habits. Always know your exits. Always position where you can see threats before they see you. Always maintain awareness of group dynamics and social hierarchies as they form. Garrett held court at the center table size and charisma, drawing others like gravity. He talked about his grandfather who'd stormed Normandy on D-Day, came home with medals and stories, and eventually pancreatic cancer that was eating him alive in slow increments. Stage 4, 6 to 8 weeks according to doctors. Hanging on because he needed to know his grandson hadn't quit. 3 generations of warriors, Garrett said, pride mixed with something heavier in his voice. Now it's my turn to prove I belong in the family legacy. Across the hall, Barrett Kane watched from a quieter table. 26 years old Wyoming ranch background hands that looked like they'd been shaped by manual labor rather than weight room isolation exercises. High school dropout who'd spent a decade working ranches and construction sites while people with college degrees told him where to build their dreams. "Hey, Pixie," Barrett called across the mess hall, voice meant to carry. "You sure you can handle the physical requirements here? Maybe call your parents for pickup before things get real." The table erupted in laughter. Elena took another bite of her food, chewed, slowly looked up at Barrett with eyes that were calm and steady and absolutely empty of fear or embarrassment or any reactions he'd been expecting. She swallowed, took a sip of water, and said in a voice that carried just as well as his, "I'll manage." Something in her tone made Barrett's smile falter. Just slightly, just enough that a few people noticed. There was a quality to her composure that didn't fit with her appearance, a stillness suggesting deep water rather than shallow. Bella, sitting nearby, filed the interaction away for future reference. As evening wore on, recruits drifted back to barracks in small groups. Some formed fast friendships, bonding over shared anxiety. Others stayed solitary, preferring to process the enormity of what they'd undertaken in private silence. Elena retreated to her bunk early, while most others remained in common areas. She lay in darkness, listening to conversations drift through the open door. Many were about her, speculation about administrative errors or diversity quotas, or the possibility she had no idea what she'd gotten into. None of them realized their speculation was exactly the point. That being underestimated was the entire mission. That every assumption they made was a data point she'd collect and analyze. That their bias, casual and unexamined, was precisely what she'd been sent to document. She pulled out 3 items from her footlocker, placed them on the small shelf beside her bunk where she could see them in darkness. First, her mother's dog tags. Lieutenant Rachel Garrett, United States Navy, KIA, the 27th of February, 1991. The metal worn smooth from decades of handling, first by Rachel, then by Elena's grandmother, now by Elena herself. Second, a tiny body camera disguised as a button on her uniform collar, recording everything, transmitting to secure servers that only Admiral Bennett could access. Evidence gathering in real time. Third, a photograph. Young Rachel in navy dress white, 6 months pregnant, smiling at the camera with the particular joy of someone who believed the future held more promise than danger. Elena had been born 2 months after that photo. Her mother had joined the Navy 2 years later. They'd had exactly 4 years together before Desert Storm. Elena touched the dog tags, whispered into darkness, "Every day, Mom. I'm going to make them see what you saw. Make them admit you were right, every single day." Somewhere down the hall, a phone buzzed with notifications, then another, then several more. A photograph was beginning its viral spread across base social media. Taken earlier that day in the women's locker room, showing a small red-headed woman with dog tags visible against pale, freckled skin. 2 sets of tags, commander rank insignia clear in the image, and a name that some of the older personnel would recognize from declassified Gulf War records, Rachel Garrett. The photo had been uploaded by Emma Wolf Garrett's younger sister, who'd been touring the facility with her parents. An accident, a momentary fumble with a phone camera that had already been active for family photos. But accidents had consequences. By morning, 50 people would have seen it. By afternoon, someone would recognize the implications. By evening, Major General Nathaniel Hardwick would receive notification that Rachel Garrett's daughter was conducting some kind of operation at Coronado. The timeline had just compressed. The careful plan to gather weeks of data before anyone noticed had collapsed into hours. But Elena didn't know that yet. She lay in her bunk thinking about her mother, about Thorne's evidence about the mission that would either expose institutional rot or destroy her career trying. Outside the Pacific continued its endless rhythm against the shore. The same ocean that had witnessed Rachel's training 3 decades ago. The same water that would test Elena in days to come. The same expanse that cared nothing for human struggles but bore witness anyway, patient and permanent, and waiting for whatever came next. In his office across the base, Master Chief Kane sat reviewing tomorrow's training schedule. His eyes kept drifting to one name on the roster, Brennan Elena. Something about her didn't add up. The way she'd stood at attention during processing, the way she'd organized her gear, the way she'd looked at him when he suggested she might be in the wrong program. That wasn't uncertainty. That was someone choosing not to respond. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Captain Foster. Something odd about recruit Brennan. Recommend additional background check. The response came within minutes. Background is need to know. Continue training as normal. Do not single out for additional scrutiny. Kane stared at the message. In 26 years, he'd learned that need to know usually meant we're not going to tell you and you're not going to like it when you find out. He saved the message, closed his phone. Tomorrow would be interesting. Somewhere in Virginia, in an office that overlooked the Potomac, Major General Nathaniel Hardwick's phone lit up with a notification. A photo flagged by automated monitoring systems that watched for certain names, certain faces, certain combinations that might indicate problems. He enlarged the image, studied it. Recognition dawned slowly, then hit with the force of old guilt resurfacing. Rachel Garrett's dog tags, on someone young enough to be, he did the math, 43 years since Desert Storm. Rachel had a daughter, he remembered, that from the casualty paperwork he'd signed. That daughter would be exactly the right age. Hardwick made a call. I need everything you have on a Commander Elena Cross. Current assignment service record security clearances. And I need it yesterday. 2 hours later, he had his answer. And the answer made his blood run cold. Rachel Garrett's daughter, SEAL qualified, currently assigned to Warcom. And as of 4 days ago, her location showed Coronado Training Facility with no official explanation for why a lieutenant commander would be there. Hardwick made another call, this one to Senator Bradford's chief of staff. We have a problem. I'm going to need the senator's help shutting down an investigation before it gains traction. The pieces were moving. The trap was set. And somewhere between them, Elena Cross slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully planned mission had just become a race against time, against power, against men who'd spent 3 decades ensuring certain truths stayed buried. Morning would bring challenges she expected, but afternoon would bring complications she couldn't have predicted. The underestimation was about to become mutual. They'd underestimated her capability. She'd underestimated their willingness to destroy anyone who threatened their carefully constructed lies. Desert Storm had happened 37 years ago, but some wars never really end. They just find new battlefields and new warriors willing to fight them. Elena's war was about to begin in earnest. Dawn broke over Coronado with the particular clarity that only came after Pacific storms had scrubbed the air clean. Morning light caught wave crests in patterns ancient and indifferent. Day 2. The photograph had been circulating for 6 hours now. 73 shares across base social media. Comments piling up with speculation that ranged from conspiracy theories to dismissive mockery. Elena woke at 04:255 minutes before reveille, her internal clock no longer capable of sleeping past that threshold after 18 years of military conditioning. Around her, the barracks was still dark, still quiet 20 recruits in various states of unconscious peace before chaos shattered everything. The trash can lid hit metal with the force of a flashbang grenade. Master Chief Kane burst through the barracks door, banging the lid like a gong from hell. Rise and shine, candidates, time to separate warriors from wannabes. Chaos erupted. Recruits stumbled from bunks, some falling in their haste, others grabbing for uniforms in the dim emergency lighting that preceded full fluorescence flickering to life. 2 minutes to formation, Kane bellowed, voice somehow louder than the metal percussion. Anyone not in proper uniform with boots laced will be doing push-ups until breakfast. And trust me, you don't want to miss breakfast. It's the last easy thing you'll experience today. While others scrambled frantically, Elena moved with quiet efficiency. Her uniform had been laid out perfectly the night before. Boots beside the bed with laces already prepared in a pattern that allowed quick securing. She was dressed and laced in 90 seconds, standing by her bunk, while half the barracks was still trying to figure out which arm went in which sleeve. Bella noticed. She'd been watching Elena since the previous night, and this confirmed suspicions. This wasn't someone learning morning routine under pressure. This was someone whose body went through motions while their brain was still waking up. Muscle memory encoded at depths that took years to develop. They fell into formation on the parade ground as first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. The air smelled of salt and impossibility, and the particular fear that came from knowing you were about to be tested in ways you couldn't fully imagine. Kane walked down the line, inspecting each recruit with eyes that missed nothing. When he reached Elena, he stopped, studied her from boots to bun. Her uniform was as perfect as regulation allowed, with equipment 3 sizes too large. Her boots were laced in a pattern he recognized but couldn't quite place. He opened his mouth, seemed to think better of whatever he was about to say, and moved on. 5-mile run, Kane announced. Full pace. Anyone who can't keep up gets remedial training. Anyone who falls more than quarter-mile behind gets dropped. Move out. The sun was barely above the horizon, air still cool enough to make breathing easy. Kane set a punishing pace, clearly intending to identify who had prepared properly and who had assumed they could coast on natural athleticism. Elena ran in the middle of the pack, maintaining exactly the pace needed to stay with average performers. Her breathing was controlled, rhythmic. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4. Out through the mouth for 4, hold for 4. Box breathing. Standard SEAL technique for maintaining oxygen efficiency during extended physical exertion. Mile 3. Garrett Wolf began to struggle. His college linebacker training had focused on explosive power and short sprints. His face had gone from pink to red, his breathing from controlled to labored. Elena moved closer, matching his pace as it began to slow. She pulled her water bottle from her belt and held it out during a brief moment when the instructors were focused elsewhere. Small sips, she said quietly, and fix your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Longer exhales than inhales. Garrett looked at her with surprise that almost made him stumble. Here was this tiny woman who looked like she should be drowning in her oversized uniform, who wasn't even breathing hard, offering him help like she was on a casual jog. Thanks, he managed between gasps. Garrett followed her breathing advice and immediately felt the difference. His vision cleared slightly. His legs stopped feeling quite so much like concrete. He wasn't going to win any races, but he wasn't going to collapse either. And that made all the difference between finishing and failing. The run concluded back at the starting point where recruits bent double hands on knees trying to remember how to breathe normally. 7 had fallen behind badly enough to earn remedial training. Garrett had made it barely, and he knew exactly who'd saved him. All right, candidates, Kane called out, not even slightly winded, despite having run the entire 5 miles at the front of the pack. 30 minutes to shower and breakfast. Then we hit the obstacle course. That's where things get interesting. The obstacle course sprawled across 2 acres of carefully designed punishment. Rope climbs, wall-scaling cargo nets, balance beams, rope traverses, tire runs low, crawls through mud. Each station was designed to test a different aspect of physical capability and mental determination. Recruits gathered at the starting line, now organized into small teams of 5. Elena found herself grouped with Garrett Bella Barrett and a quiet young man named Cole Bridger. 23 years old, California lifeguard background, the lean build of someone who'd spent his life in water. But there was something else in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. A grief that sat just below the surface like a riptide waiting to pull you under. The whistle blew. Teams launched themselves at the first obstacle. The rope climb came third in the sequence. 30 feet of thick hemp rope hanging from a steel frame. Garrett attacked it with football player aggression, powering up through sheer muscle. He made it, but slowly, arms shaking by the top. Bella went next, police training evident in her steady progress. Barrett struggled, his ranch strength working against him. Cole made it look easy, lifeguard fitness translating well. Then Elena's turn. She approached the rope with casual confidence that didn't match her size. Gripped it at the bottom. Then in a movement so smooth it looked choreographed, she locked her feet using a J-hook technique, pushed with her legs, pulled with her arms in perfect rhythm, and ascended the 30 feet in 8 seconds flat. Textbook military rope climb, the kind that took hundreds of hours to master. The course instructor was staring at her when she reached the ground. "Where did you learn to climb like that, Brennan?" "Had a good instructor back home, sir. Rock climbing." "That wasn't rock climbing technique. That was military rope climb, specifically. That was the method we teach in advanced infantry school." Elena shrugged, non-committal. "Maybe my instructor used to be military." The instructor's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, just made a note on his clipboard. The 12-foot wall came next. Most recruits attacked it with brute force. Running at it, jumping, scrabbling for purchase, Elena hit the wall at a run, planted one foot about 5 feet up, used that momentum to reach higher, with her hands caught the top edge, and pulled herself up and over in one smooth motion. 3 seconds, textbook perfect. Halfway through the course at the cargo net obstacle, Barrett Kane found himself in trouble. The net was strung between two poles 15 feet high. Barrett had made it to the top, but somehow got his left leg tangled in the netting. Panic was starting to set in. Elena was up the net in seconds. She moved beside him, her voice calm and steady. "Barrett, stop fighting it. Focus on your hands. Feet will follow. You've scaled hay barns higher than this." Barrett's breathing was ragged. "How the hell do you know I worked ranches?" Elena realized her mistake a half-second too late. "Lucky guess," she said quickly. "Your hands, calluses in the right places." Barrett stared at her with suspicion mixing into the panic, but her hands were already working the netting free from his leg with practiced efficiency. "Now climb. Don't think, just move. You've got this." By the time the team completed the full course, Elena had demonstrated professional-level capability across every obstacle. The kind of comprehensive excellence that came from systematic training rather than natural athleticism. As they stood cooling down, Barrett moved close to Elena and said quietly, "Who the hell are you really? Just someone trying to make it through training. That wasn't beginner performance. That was professional level. So I'm asking again, who are you?" Before Elena could respond, Kane's voice cut across the training area. "Brennan front and center." Every head turned. Elena jogged over to where Kane stood with the course instructor and gunnery sergeant Marcus Hayes, who ran the hand-to-hand combat program. "Brennan," Kane said slowly, "your performance today has been exceptional. Beyond exceptional. We're going to test your hand-to-hand skills." The combat training area was a large mat surface surrounded by safety padding. Recruits gathered around the perimeter to watch. Gunnery Sergeant Hayes was 45 years old, built like weathered steel, former Force Recon Marine. "Stone," he called out. "You're up. Defense scenarios. Brennan will attack you. Defend and counter." Bella stepped onto the mat, settling into a stance that showed her police defensive tactics training. Elena moved to face her, smaller, seemingly less threatening. "Standard rear choke," Hayes instructed. "Stone apply. Brennan defend and counter." Bella moved behind Elena, wrapped her arm around Elena's throat in a textbook rear naked choke. Not tight enough to actually injure, but firm enough to simulate the real threat. What happened next took 2.7 seconds. Elena's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. She tucked her chin, raised her near arm in the answer the phone position to protect her airway. Simultaneously, she gripped Bella's choking arm with both hands, dropped her weight, and turned her hips. The movement broke Bella's balance. Before Bella could adjust, Elena continued the rotation, taking Bella to the ground. In the same fluid motion, she transitioned to mount position, secured Bella's arms, and applied her own rear naked choke with the hooks in, and everything locked perfectly. Complete silence filled the training area. Bella tapped out. Elena immediately released, and both women stood. Bella was rubbing her throat, looking at Elena with an expression that was pure shock. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Bella asked, her voice carrying across the mat. "Self-defense classes back home," Elena replied. "Had a good instructor." Gunnery Sergeant Hayes stepped onto the mat, his face showing carefully controlled expression. "Miss Brennan," he said slowly, "that was not self-defense class technique. That was Level 3 Marine Martial Arts program. That was SEAL close quarters combat. The exact counter you used is from Advanced Naval Special Warfare curriculum. Curriculum that is not taught to civilians." He paused. Every eye in the training area was on Elena. "So I'm going to ask you one time. Where exactly did you learn that technique?" Elena held his gaze. "I had a good instructor back home, someone who believed in being thorough in their teaching." Hayes studied her for a long moment. "Whatever training you've had," he said finally, "it shows. Maybe you can help some of the others with their technique." It was a dismissal and an acknowledgement and a promise all at once. He'd seen what she could do. He'd identified what it meant, and he was choosing for now to let it slide. But he'd be watching. Lunch came and went with whispered conversations at every table. The viral photograph had reached critical mass now. 200 shares, 300. Someone had pulled Rachel Garrett's service record from declassified Gulf War archives. Someone else had noticed the genetic resemblance. The speculation was no longer whether Elena was who she claimed to be. The speculation was about why she was here and what it meant. Elena retreated to the women's locker room during a brief afternoon break. She stood at the sink looking at herself in the mirror. Red hair escaping its bun, freckles dark across her nose and cheeks. She pulled out the dog tags from under her shirt, let them hang visible against her chest. Her tags showing Lieutenant Commander rank, her mother's tags from Desert Storm. "Show them what real strength looks like," she whispered to the empty room. Her mother's voice in memory, sharp and clear. Her phone buzzed. A secure message from Admiral Bennett. "Photo went viral. Hardwick knows. Timeline compressed. Thorn en route to brief you. Meet at Beach Overlook, 1900 hours." Elena's stomach dropped. Hardwick knew. The mission had just shifted from careful documentation to a race against time. The Naval Special Warfare Pool Facility was a massive complex that housed an Olympic-sized pool, various water obstacles, and equipment designed to simulate ocean conditions. The smell of chlorine mixed with salt air. Chief Petty Officer Blake Morgan stood at the pool's edge, lean and weathered. His eyes were sharp, assessing each recruit as they filed in. "Listen up," Morgan called out. "Water survival consists of 3 phases. Phase 1, treading water for 30 minutes while wearing full gear. That's 40 pounds of weight. The water is 62 degrees Fahrenheit." He walked along the pool's edge, hands clasped behind his back. "Phase 2 is underwater navigation. 6 hoops at varying depths, 3 obstacles, a darkened section with 0 visibility, and object retrieval from 15 feet. You have 10 minutes. Several faces had gone pale. Phase 3 is rescue scenarios. You'll be paired up. One person simulates a drowning victim. The other executes rescue and recovery." He paused. "Historical failure rate for the complete package is 42%. Any questions?" Silence. "Good. Gear up. We start in 15 minutes. Elena was handed a wetsuit at least 3 sizes too large. She began rolling the sleeves with practiced efficiency, folding the excess material in ways that minimized drag while maintaining mobility. Phase 1 began. 25 recruits entered the water in designated zones, weight vests pulling them down with insistent gravity. The water was cold enough to steal breath. "Start your 30 minutes, Morgan called out. "Now!" Elena maintained her position with minimal effort, using an egg beater kick that was standard for water polo players and special operations swimmers. Her upper body stayed relatively still, conserving energy, while her legs did the work in small, efficient circles. Morgan noticed. He was walking the pool's perimeter, watching everyone, but his eyes kept returning to Elena's position. Her technique was too good, too efficient, too practiced. Minute 18. Garrett Wolf was struggling. His college linebacker build, so advantageous on land, became a liability in water. His face had gone from pink to red to an alarming shade of pale. Elena moved closer, not touching him, not violating the rules. "Garrett, you're fighting the water. Stop." His eyes found hers, desperate, exhausted. "Can't. Too heavy." Egg beater kick. "Watch my legs. Small circular movements, alternate legs. Let them do the work. Upper body relaxed." She demonstrated her lower body, visible in the clear water, legs moving in controlled patterns that looked almost lazy, but generated significant lift. Garrett tried to copy her technique. Gradually, his body found the rhythm. His head stopped dipping. His breathing became more controlled. Minute 22. Barrett was in trouble. Elena raised her voice slightly. "Barrett, vertical position. Stop fighting. Let the water support you. Work with it, not against it." Pride warred with survival instinct. Then survival won. He adjusted his position, tried to implement her advice. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Minute 30. Morgan's whistle blew. "Time. Exit the pool." 18 recruits climbed out. 7 had failed. Garrett and Barrett dragged themselves to the edge, utterly spent, but successful. They both looked at Elena with new understanding. Elena pulled herself out of the water with movements that showed 0 fatigue. Morgan watched her exit with eyes that had moved from curiosity to outright suspicion. 10-minute break, Morgan announced. "Prepare for Phase 2. The course was laid out in the deep end, extending down to 15 feet at its maximum depth. 6 hoops formed a 3-dimensional maze. 3 obstacles, a wall penetration, a cargo net, and a pipe crawl. The darkened section was achieved with black canvas, creating an underwater tunnel with 0 light penetration. Cole went first, completing it in 6 minutes, 45 seconds. Garrett barely passed it, 9 minutes, 52. Bella posted 7 minutes, 30 seconds. Barrett struggled through at 9 minutes, 15. 4 recruits failed. Then Elena's turn. "Ready, Brennan. Ready, Chief. Go." Elena entered the water with barely a splash, her body slicing through the surface and immediately descending to 8 feet where the first hoop waited. She moved through water like it was her natural element. Combat swimmer stroke, a variant of the frog kick that generated maximum forward movement with minimum effort. Her arms stayed close to her body in streamlined position. Her body position was horizontal, reducing drag. First hoop, second, third. She navigated the three-dimensional maze without hesitation. The wall penetration she found immediately and passed through like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The cargo net she navigated with patient, methodical movements that avoided entanglement entirely. The pipe crawl required exhaling to reduce chest volume. Elena entered without pause. She emerged on the other side and immediately descended to 12 feet for the darkened section. This was where most recruits struggled. Zero visibility required navigation by touch alone. Elena entered the black canvas tunnel and disappeared from sight. Morgan was watching his stopwatch. 2 minutes passed, 2.5. Elena emerged from the darkness at exactly 2 minutes 40 seconds. Her navigation perfect, her trajectory taking her directly to the 15-foot bottom where 3 objects waited. She reached for the waterproof container marked with reflective tape without hesitation and pushed off the bottom in a controlled descent. She surfaced at 3 minutes 47 seconds total elapsed time. The pool area was completely silent. Morgan stared at his stopwatch. 3 minutes 47 seconds. That wasn't just good. That was exceptional. That was faster than some of my instructor cadre. That was SEAL-level performance. Elena swam to the edge and pulled herself out. Morgan approached her slowly. Brennan, where exactly did you learn to swim like that? I grew up on the California coast, Chief. Spent summers freediving. That wasn't recreational diving technique. That was combat swimmer stroke. That's military. Specifically, that's naval special warfare. Elena met his gaze steadily, saying nothing. Before Morgan could push further, a new voice cut across the pool area. Chief, a word. Senior Chief Vincent Thorne stood in the doorway. 68 years old, but still carrying himself like the warrior he'd been for 5 decades. Morgan snapped to attention instinctively. Begging your pardon, Senior Chief, but I'm in the middle of evaluating candidates. I can see that. Walk with me for a moment. Morgan hesitated, then nodded. 5-minute break. As the 2 men walked away, Bella moved to Elena's side. That was professional level, Bella said quietly, and Thorne just intervened before Morgan could push you on it. Elena wrung water from her wetsuit sleeves, not responding. Your cover is blown, Bella continued. Maybe not officially, but everyone here knows you're not what you claim to be. Morgan returned with Thorne and his face showing frustration, born from being told to drop a line of inquiry he clearly wanted to pursue. But before Morgan could announce the next phase, Thorne's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his weathered face going rigid. He moved to Elena with particular urgency. Commander, Thorne said quietly, pulling her aside. Hardwick just filed a formal complaint with the Inspector General. He's claiming you're conducting an unauthorized investigation using stolen classified materials. He's pushing for immediate arrest warrant. Elena's stomach dropped. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Thorne pulled out a small waterproof case from his jacket, which is why I'm giving you this now instead of waiting. He opened the case. Inside 3 USB drives, a handwritten note, and a worn photograph of Rachel Garrett in Grenada, 1983, standing beside a young Chief Petty Officer Thorne. 37 years of evidence, Thorne said. Drive 1 witness statements from 8 SEALs who survived Iraq, all confirming Rachel's VX warning was ignored. Drive 2 chemical analysis proving the compound had VX classified to avoid international incident. Drive 3 Hardwick's original draft AAR, where he admitted Rachel was right before he rewrote it to say equipment failure. Elena stared at the drives. You've had proof of Hardwick's cover-up for 37 years. I was a chief facing a commander who had senators protecting him. No one would listen to me then. Thorne's voice carried decades of frustration. But I kept collecting evidence. Every deployment where Hardwick dismissed female intel officers, I documented it. Iraq 2015, Syria 2018, Syria 2020. The pattern is undeniable. Why give this to me now? Because if Hardwick gets you arrested before we can get this to the IG, it all disappears. But if you have copies, if Bennett has copies, if Colonel Donovan has copies, Thorne smiled grimly, then Hardwick can't bury it even if he buries you. Elena took the case. How many copies exist? 12, stored in 6 different locations, 3 with Congressional Oversight Committee staffers, 2 with military journalists, 1 with Rachel's mother, your grandmother. Thorne met her eyes. I promised Rachel I'd protect you if anything happened to her. This is how I keep that promise. Hardwick can come after you, but he can't stop the truth anymore. Morgan returned to the pool deck. Phase 3, he announced. Rescue scenarios. Partner up. Elena was paired with Barrett. They entered the water at opposite ends of the designated area. Morgan gave the signal. Barrett began simulating panic-thrashing, gasping arms windmilling. Elena approached from behind and immediately wrapped her arm across his chest in a cross-chest carry that pinned his arms while keeping his head above water. Her voice was calm, steady, cutting through his simulated panic. "I've got you. Stop fighting me. I will not let you go. Breathe." The words that toned the absolute certainty in her voice cut through even Barrett's committed acting. He stopped thrashing, felt himself being towed toward the pool edge with smooth, powerful strokes. At the edge, she helped him out with technique that protected simulated injuries, demonstrating textbook-perfect victim management. By 1100 hours, day 3 of water training was complete. 15 recruits remained from the original 25, 10 had failed. As the group dispersed toward the changing rooms, Elena's phone buzzed with another secure message from Bennett. "Emergency situation developing. Captain Foster, inbound your location. Stand by." Something was wrong. The mission had been to gather evidence over weeks, but the timeline had compressed to days, and now it felt like it was compressing to hours. Whatever was coming, it was coming fast. Captain Diana Foster appeared in the doorway of the pool facility at precisely 11:47 hours. Her expression carried the particular tension of someone delivering news that would change everything. Elena was still in her wetsuit when Foster's eyes found her across the pool deck. The captain's slight head tilt was instruction enough. Elena grabbed a towel and moved toward the exit. They walked in silence through corridors. Foster's pace was measured, deliberate. The security detail maintained professional distance. The conference room was small, windowless, equipped with electronic countermeasures. Admiral Bennett's face filled the secure video screen. "Commander Cross," he said, and the use of her real rank meant protocols had shifted. "We have a situation that requires immediate action." Elena remained standing, water still dripping from her wetsuit. "Sir, 37 minutes ago, a civilian fishing vessel capsized approximately 1.8 miles offshore. 4 people aboard, 2 visible, clinging to debris, both showing signs of severe hypothermia. 2 missing, presumed trapped under the capsized hull. Coast Guard response time is 25 minutes minimum. Weather is deteriorating. Seas building to 6 to 8 feet. Water temperature 58 degrees. Bennett paused. "That location is inside our training area jurisdiction, which means any qualified swimmers should volunteer as support while Coast Guard en route." Elena's mind was already running calculations. 58-degree water meant hypothermia on set in 15 to 20 minutes for unprotected civilians. Every minute decreased survival probability. "Sir, I can be ready to deploy in 10 minutes. "I know you can, Commander. The question is whether you understand what deploying means for your mission here. You'll be operating at full capability in front of your entire recruit cohort. They'll see exactly what a SEAL commander can do. There will be no more questions about your background. Your cover will be completely burned." Elena thought about the mission. Weeks of planned documentation, systematic evidence gathering. All of that would evaporate the moment she stepped onto that rescue boat. Then she thought about 4 civilians drowning while she worried about operational security. "Sir, the mission was to prove that capability matters more than appearance. I can't think of a better demonstration than saving lives that would be lost if we waited for response teams. Permission to proceed." Bennett's expression shifted slightly. "Granted, but Commander, you should know that Major General Hardwick contacted my office 40 minutes ago. He's demanding your immediate removal from Coronado and formal investigation. He's invoking national security authority." "How long until he can enforce that?" "He's currently in transit from Virginia. ETA Coronado is approximately 90 minutes, which means you have 1 hour to complete this rescue and return before he arrives with enough authority to shut everything down." Elena's stomach went cold. Hardwick was coming here, and he'd be here in 90 minutes. "Then we better move fast, sir. Chief Morgan is already prepping the rescue boat. Senior Chief Thorne will accompany as tactical observer. You'll have full operational command for civilian rescue." But Commander Bennett's voice hardened. "When Hardwick arrives, you stand down. You do not engage him directly. Are we clear?" "Crystal, sir." "Good hunting, Commander." And Elena Bennett's formality softened for just a moment. "Your mother would be proud, not because you're seeking revenge, but because when it mattered, you chose lives over mission parameters. That's what she did. That's what got her killed. And that's what makes you worthy of carrying her legacy." The screen went dark. Foster handed Elena an equipment bag. "Properly fitted rescue suit, command radio emergency beacon. The recruits are being assembled on the dock as we speak." Master Chief Kane is briefing them that you're SEAL qualified and taking operational command. Your cover is officially burned. Elena stripped out of the oversized wetsuit and pulled on gear that actually fit her frame. The difference was profound. Where the training equipment had hidden her capabilities, this gear enhanced them. She caught her reflection in the darkened video screen. This was what a SEAL commander looked like. Compact, efficient, radiating the particular confidence that came from knowing exactly what she was capable of and having proven it in situations where failure meant death. No more hiding. Just the truth of 11 years earning the right to wear this gear. They moved quickly through corridors and out onto the dock where the rescue boat waited. Chief Morgan was aboard running pre-deployment checks. 2 safety divers were gearing up. A medical technician was prepping hypothermia treatment equipment, and on the dock, 15 recruits stood in a loose formation, their expressions ranging from shock to confusion to dawning comprehension. Master Chief Kane stood with them, his weathered face showing the particular frustration of someone who'd been kept in the dark about something happening in his own command. Elena walked past them toward the boat, and the difference in how she moved was impossible to miss. This wasn't the tentative recruit who'd stumbled off the bus 3 days ago. This was an operator moving with purpose, command presence radiating from her small frame in ways that made grown men straighten their spines without realizing why. Garrett Wolf's mouth was literally hanging open. Bella Stone's detective instincts were vindicated, and she looked torn between satisfaction at being right and anger at being played. Barrett Kane's expression showed cognitive dissonance, trying to reconcile the person he'd mocked with the commander, now boarding a rescue boat. And Cole Bridger was staring at Elena with an intensity that suggested pieces were falling into place. Senior Chief Thorne was already aboard checking equipment with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that small oversights killed people. He looked up as Elena approached, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement. Understanding. The weight of a promise made 37 years ago and finally being kept. "Commander," Thorne said, the formality making everything official. "Senior Chief, what's our tactical picture?" Morgan looked up from his instrument checks. "Vessel capsized approximately 8 minutes ago. Last radio contact indicated 4 souls aboard fishing charter out of San Diego. 2 confirmed visual on debris, male approximately 45 years old showing signs of advanced hypothermia, teenage male, approximately 16 showing panic behavior. 2 unaccounted for, presumed trapped in air pockets if they're still alive. Weather? Deteriorating faster than forecast predicted. Swells building to 8 feet, wind 15 knots and increasing. We've got maybe 45 minutes before conditions make rescue operations significantly more dangerous. Coast Guard ETA. 22 minutes now. They're inbound from San Diego Station helicopter with dive-rated rescue swimmers." Elena did the math. 22 minutes meant the trapped victims would likely be dead or dying from hypothermia and oxygen depletion. The visible victims might not last that long either. "Then we better be fast. Let's move." The boat's engines roared to life. Lines were cast off. They pulled away from the dock with purpose, cutting through swells that were indeed building higher than comfortable. Elena stood at the bow, eyes on the horizon, already running tactical assessments. Behind her on the dock, 15 recruits watched in stunned silence. Kane stood with them, his jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice carried across the water. "That woman is Lieutenant Commander Elena Cross, Navy SEAL, 11 years service. She's been here conducting an evaluation of our training protocols." He paused. "And every single one of us failed that evaluation by assuming she wasn't qualified based on nothing but appearance." On the boat, spray kicked up as they hit each wave. The radio crackled with updates from Coast Guard coordination. Morgan was calling out ranges, conditions, approach vectors. Thorne was watching Elena with the particular attention of someone assessing whether years away from active operations had dulled her edge. They covered the 1.8 miles in just under 6 minutes. As they approached, the capsized vessel came into view. 25 feet of fiberglass hull floating upside down, rocking in swells that were definitely approaching 8 feet now. 2 figures clung to debris nearby, one barely moving, one thrashing in desperation. "I've got the visible victims," Elena told Morgan. "You coordinate boat positioning and recovery. Once they're secure, I'm going under the hull for the missing 2. Morgan's expression showed he wanted to argue, but he was looking at a SEAL commander with 11 years of experience, and his training said, you didn't question operational command when lives were at stake. "Your call, ma'am. Be safe." Elena entered the 58-degree water like she'd been born there. The cold was sharp, immediate, demanding respect, but not fear. She'd trained in worse. The Arctic Circle exercises that left ice forming in your hair, The North Atlantic in winter, where you measured survival time in minutes. This was manageable, uncomfortable, but manageable. She reached the first victim in under 2 minutes. The middle-aged man was barely conscious, hypothermic lips, blue eyes unfocused. Classic severe cold water exposure. She secured a flotation collar around him, shifted into cross-chest carry position to protect his airway. "I've got you," she said, clearly, her voice cutting through his hypothermic confusion with particular authority that made people believe even when their body was shutting down. "Stay with me. You're going to be okay." She signaled the boat, which maneuvered close despite the challenging conditions. Hands reached down, pulling the man to safety. The medical technician immediately began hypothermia treatment. Elena swam for the second victim. The teenage boy was in better physical condition, but panicking, which made him infinitely more dangerous. Classic drowning victim behavior. She approached from behind and wrapped her arm around him before he could grab at her. "Stop fighting," she commanded, voice carrying absolute authority. "I have you. Trust me. Breathe." The command in her voice cut through his terror. He stopped thrashing, let her tow him toward the boat. His breathing was still ragged with panic, but he was following instructions now. They loaded him aboard. 2 down, 2 to go. Everyone's eyes turned to the capsized hull. Under there, if the other 2 were still alive, they were running out of time. "I'm going in," Elena said. The hull presented a nightmare of inverted geometry. Navigation would require touch and spatial awareness in near-zero visibility. Elena took 3 deep breaths, hyperventilating, to load her blood with oxygen, controlled the technique that extended breath hold time without risking shallow water blackout. Then she dove. The world became green-tinted darkness as she descended beneath the hull. She found an opening near what had been the stern, pulled herself through into an inverted cabin space that defied orientation. Her hands felt structure, building a 3-dimensional map in her mind. She found the first air pocket near what had been the helm station. 2 people, a woman in her 40s with an obviously broken arm face tight with pain and fear. An elderly man in his 70s with a head injury, blood mixing with water, eyes unfocused. Getting them out would require multiple dives. The woman first because she was conscious. Elena surfaced, explained the situation to Morgan, grabbed additional flotation equipment, and dove again. The extraction of the woman took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of guiding her through the inverted cabin through the opening to the surface. The woman was hypothermic, in pain, terrified, but she was alive. The second dive for the elderly man was harder. He was semi-conscious, couldn't follow instructions, represented dead weight that Elena had to maneuver through tight spaces while her lungs screamed for air. She positioned him near the exit, surfaced for 1 breath, then dove again to complete the extraction. By the time Elena surfaced for the final time with the elderly man secured and stable, she'd been underwater for a cumulative total of 11 minutes across 3 dives. Each dive had pushed her breath hold capacity to its limits. The Coast Guard helicopter was just arriving, rotors thundering overhead. All 4 civilians were alive. Hypothermic injured, traumatized, but alive. The boat turned back toward base, victims stabilized, mission complete. Elena stood at the bow, breathing hard now that the adrenaline was fading, muscles aching, lungs burning. But she'd done it. As the boat pulled alongside the dock, she could see the 15 recruits still waiting. They'd watched the entire operation through binoculars. The silence as Elena stepped onto the dock was profound. Garrett was the first to break it. His voice carried a mixture of awe and shame. "You're a SEAL, an actual Navy SEAL." Elena looked at him, then at the others. At Bella, whose suspicions had been proven correct. At Barrett, who'd called her Pixie. At Cole, whose expression held questions about his brother. At the 12 others who'd spent 3 days making assumptions. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Elena Cross," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I'm a Navy SEAL with 18 years service, 11 as an operator. I've been here conducting an evaluation of training protocols. I apologize for the deception, but the mission required it." Bella's voice cut through sharp with something between anger and admiration. "We trusted you. I told you about my shooting incident in Boston. We were research subjects." Elena met Bella's eyes directly. "The help I gave was real. When Garrett had heat exhaustion during the run, when Barrett was tangled in the cargo net, when any of you struggled in the water, I helped because I care about your success. That wasn't part of the evaluation. That was being human. That was being a teammate." "But you lied," Garrett said, his voice thick with confusion. "Yes, because the evaluation required determining how long it would take for performance to override initial assumptions. How many demonstrations of capability would be needed before you stopped seeing a small woman in oversized fatigues and started seeing a qualified operator? She gestured toward the ocean where the rescue had just taken place. Even after 3 days of exceptional performance, some of you still weren't sure. It took a real-world emergency where lives were at stake for the truth to become undeniable. The weight of that truth settled over the group. Before anyone could respond, Master Chief Kane stepped forward. His weathered face showed genuine humility, mixed with painful self-awareness. Commander Cross, I need to say this in front of everyone. His voice was rough, carrying decades of authority, but stripped of defensiveness. I made assumptions about your capability based on nothing but appearance. When you arrived, I suggested you were in the wrong program. I treated you like someone who'd made a mistake rather than recognizing you for what you are, one of the most qualified operators to ever set foot in this facility. He paused, his jaw working. That was wrong, unprofessional, and I'm ashamed it took watching you pull 4 people out of the ocean for me to see past my own bias. The Navy taught me better than that. Your mother, who served in the same war I did, deserved better than that. You deserve better than that. Elena nodded slowly. Master Chief, you're not alone in that failure. That's exactly why I'm here. Not to judge individuals, but to understand how systemic bias operates so we can fix it. So the next woman who walks through these gates doesn't have to prove herself 4 different ways before anyone takes her seriously. Before the conversation could continue, Captain Foster appeared at the far end of the dock, moving quickly. Commander Cross, Admiral Bennett needs you immediately. There's been a development. Elena followed Foster back toward the administrative building, aware of 15 pairs of eyes watching her go. Foster's office had been converted into a makeshift command center. Admiral Bennett's face filled the primary screen, but 2 additional screens showed other participants. One screen showed a man Elena didn't recognize initially, 50 years old, weathered by field service, wearing the eagles of a full colonel. The other screen showed Major General Nathaniel Hardwick. Elena's breath caught. This was the first time she'd seen him outside of old photographs. 67 years old now, still carrying himself with rigid military bearing. His chest displayed enough ribbons to open a small military museum. His eyes held the calculating coldness of someone who'd spent decades in positions of power. The man who'd killed her mother, who'd falsified reports to cover his mistakes, who'd spent 37 years burying evidence. Commander Cross, Bennett said, his voice carrying formal weight. This is Colonel Marcus Donovan. He's been working with the Inspector General for the past 18 months on an investigation into Major General Hardwick's conduct across multiple deployments. Elena's mind reeled. Donovan wasn't the target of the investigation. He was running it. And this, Bennett continued with particular care, is Major General Hardwick, who has invoked his authority as JSOC liaison to demand immediate termination of your operation at Coronado. Hardwick's voice carried patrician authority. Admiral Bennett, Commander Cross is conducting an unauthorized investigation using classified operational protocols. She's compromised security by operating under false credentials, and she's attempting to relitigate settled matters from Desert Storm that were properly classified for national security reasons. I'm ordering her immediate removal and formal investigation. Elena felt rage rising hot and insistent. This man had killed her mother, had lied about it, had buried evidence, and now he was invoking national security to cover it up again. But Bennett had been clear. Do not engage directly. Do not give him grounds for insubordination. She kept her mouth shut. Colonel Donovan spoke for the first time, his voice carrying weight. General Hardwick, with respect, you're not in a position to order anything related to this investigation. The Inspector General has sufficient evidence to proceed with formal charges. Evidence I've been collecting for 18 months. Evidence that proves a pattern of dismissing female officers' intelligence assessments across 3 separate deployments, resulting in preventable deaths. Hardwick's face went rigid. You wore a wire against your commanding officer. I wore a wire against a man who taught me to ignore tactical intelligence from women because he couldn't accept that they might know more than him. A man whose arrogance got Captain Sarah Brennan killed in Syria. A man who got Lieutenant Rachel Garrett killed in Iraq 37 years ago and falsified reports to cover it up. Donovan's voice hardened. Sir, I was there in Iraq 2015 when Lieutenant Commander Jessica Reeves warned about the IED network. You dismissed her assessment. She died in the exact ambush she'd predicted. I was there in Syria 2018 when Major Catherine Walsh identified the mortar positions. You overrode her targeting priorities. She died when those positions fired on our compound. And I was there in Syria 2020 when Sarah Brennan begged me to reroute our convoy. I ignored her because you'd taught me that women overcomplicate threats She died, and I became exactly what killed her. Elena watched Hardwick's expression cycle through rage and calculation and dawning realization that his carefully constructed protection was collapsing. Colonel Donovan, Hardwick said slowly, you're making serious allegations against a superior officer based on what hearsay circumstantial connections. You have no proof. Donovan's expression was grim. I have recordings of you telling me specifically female officers lack the tactical instinct for real-time battlefield decisions. Their assessments are academically sound but operationally overcautious. I have your own words, sir, from 3 separate deployments, along with casualty reports that prove every woman you dismissed was correct in her assessment. Bennett leaned forward. General Hardwick, the Inspector General, has sufficient evidence to proceed with an Article 32 investigation. The question now is whether you cooperate or whether we expand the investigation to include obstruction and witness intimidation. Hardwick's jaw clenched. This is a witch hunt, Hardwick said finally. Politically motivated revisionism designed to punish successful officers for making hard choices in combat. I won't dignify it with cooperation. Then you'll dignify it with a court-martial, Bennett replied. Your choice, General. The screen showing Hardwick went dark. He'd disconnected, probably already calling his lawyers and his political connections. Bennett exhaled slowly. Commander Cross, I apologize for that ambush, but it was necessary for General Hardwick to see that we have multiple lines of evidence. That this isn't just about your mother or about your undercover operation. That the pattern is documented, provable, and beyond his ability to bury. Elena found her voice. Sir, what happens now? Now, Colonel Donovan's evidence goes to the Inspector General for formal review. Your documentation from Coronado provides current proof that the bias still exists. Senior Chief Thorne's historical evidence proves the pattern goes back decades. And together, all of that becomes the foundation for systemic reforms. And Hardwick, he'll fight. He has Senator Bradford protecting him, Pentagon connections that run deep, and a career's worth of favors to call in. But he's fighting from a defensive position now. The truth is documented, multiple witnesses, recorded admissions, casualty reports that prove the pattern. He can slow it down, but he can't stop it. Donovan's face on the screen showed something between relief and exhaustion. Commander Cross, I need to say something directly to you. Your mother saved my life in Grenada when I was a lieutenant fresh out of Annapolis. She was right then about the tactical approach we should take, and I've spent the past 3 decades becoming the kind of officer who ignored women exactly the way Hardwick ignored her. His voice cracked slightly. Captain Sarah Brennan died because I'd learned Hardwick's lessons too well. I can't bring her back. I can't bring your mother back. But I can make sure the system that enabled him gets dismantled. That's why I've spent 18 months building this case. Not for revenge, for prevention. Elena studied him through the screen, saw genuine remorse, genuine commitment to making amends. Colonel Donovan. She said carefully, my mother used to say, according to the letters she left, that mistakes were only failures if you refused to learn from them. You learned. You're trying to fix it. That matters. Donovan nodded, not trusting his voice. Bennett spoke again. Commander Cross, you have 48 hours of leave while we process the evidence and coordinate with the Inspector General. I suggest you use them to rest. This is going to get messy before it gets better. Elena had one more question. Sir, what about the recruits? They know I was undercover now. Does that compromise the data? On the contrary, Bennett said, Master Chief Kane has been documenting his own reactions and assessments since you arrived. His testimony about his initial bias combined with your performance data creates exactly the evidence we need. The recruit's transformation from mockery to respect, documented over 3 days, proves the point better than anything we could have scripted. He paused. And Commander, they're asking if you'll continue training with them. They want to complete the program with you as their instructor, not their fellow recruit. Kane supports it, says having a SEAL commander running them through the remaining phases would be valuable experience. Elena thought about that. Thought about Garrett and Bella and Barrett and Cole. Thought about the opportunity to train the next generation, not just in tactics, but in the harder lesson of recognizing capability, regardless of packaging. I'll do it, sir. If they want to learn, I'll teach. Bennett smiled. Good. Report back to Kane in 48 hours. Dismissed. The screens went dark. Elena stood alone in Foster's office, processing everything that had just happened. Hardwick was on the defensive. Donovan was an ally, not an enemy. The investigation was moving forward, and she just agreed to train the recruits who'd spent 3 days underestimating her. She walked out into afternoon sun that painted everything gold. The dock was empty now, the rescue boat secured. But as she approached the barracks, she could see figures gathered in small groups, clearly processing the day's revelations. Cole Bridger separated from one group and walked toward her. His expression held the intensity of someone who'd been waiting for answers too long. "Commander Cross," he said formally, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "My brother Daniel. They told me he quit Buds in 2021, that he couldn't handle Hell Week. But you were training cadre then, weren't you?" Elena had been dreading this conversation, but Cole deserved truth. "Yes, I was there." "Did he quit?" "No, he didn't quit. And you deserve to know what really happened. Walk with me." They moved away from the barracks down toward the beach where the Pacific continued its endless rhythm against the shore. "Daniel had undiagnosed long QT syndrome," Elena said quietly. "It's a heart arrhythmia condition. Genetic often doesn't show symptoms until extreme stress. Hell Week Day 3 ocean rescue drill. Another recruit got caught in a riptide pulled under drowning." She could see the memory playing out in her mind. Daniel saw it happen, didn't hesitate, went after the recruit without waiting for instructor clearance, without thinking about personal risk. He pulled the recruit to safety, saved his life. Cole's eyes were bright with tears. Then, what happened? The physical exertion, combined with cold water, triggered cardiac arrest. Daniel's heart just stopped. We had medics on scene in under a minute, but it wasn't enough. He died doing exactly what SEALs are supposed to do, putting others first, making the choice that saves lives, even when it costs your own. "Why did they tell us he quit?" Cole's voice was raw. Elena chose her words carefully. "Command made a decision. Your family was devastated by his death. Telling you he died, saving someone, might have made you want to follow his path, potentially die the same way if you had the same genetic condition. Telling you he quit was meant to protect you, keep you from idolizing a death they thought was preventable. They lied to protect me. They lied for what they thought were good reasons. But yes, they lied, and you deserve better. Daniel deserved better. He died a hero, and he should be remembered as one." Cole was silent for a long moment, tears streaming down his face, processing 3 years of shame and confusion and grief that was suddenly transforming into something different. Pride, understanding, peace. "Can you help me get his name on the memorial wall?" he finally asked, "with the truth about how he died?" "Senior Chief Thorne has already started that process. Daniel Bridger's name will go on that wall with full honors. I promise you that." Cole broke down completely. Elena let him grieve, gave him space to process, understood that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was simply witness someone's pain without trying to fix it. When he'd regained some composure, Cole looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for telling me the truth, for not protecting me from it. You deserve the truth. Everyone does." They walked back toward the barracks in silence. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Master Chief Kane was waiting near the entrance. "Commander Cross, the recruits would like to speak with you. All of them, if you have time." Elena followed him into the common area where 15 recruits were gathered. They stood when she entered, instinctive respect that had nothing to do with orders and everything to do with having seen what she could do when it mattered. Garrett spoke first. "Commander, we wanted to apologize. We spent 3 days making jokes, assuming you didn't belong here, treating you like you were lost. We were wrong, and we're sorry," Bella added. "More than that, we wanted to thank you for helping us even when we didn't deserve it, for coaching Garrett through the run, for talking Barrett down from the cargo net, for teaching us in the water. You could have let us fail to prove your point. You didn't." Barrett's voice was gruff, embarrassed. "I called you Pixie, told you to get picked up by your parents. I was an asshole, and I'm sorry." Elena looked at each of them in turn, saw genuine remorse, genuine commitment to learning from their mistakes. "I accept your apologies," she said, "but understand something. The bias you showed wasn't unique to you. It's systemic, institutional. You were taught to assess capability based on appearance before you ever arrived here." She paused. "What matters now isn't that you got it wrong. It's what you do with that knowledge going forward. When the next person walks through those gates who doesn't fit your mental image of what a warrior looks like, will you assess them based on performance or appearance? Will you give them the chance to prove capability before deciding they don't belong?" "We will," Garrett said, and the others nodded agreement. "Good, because Admiral Bennett has authorized me to continue training with you for the remaining phases of this program, not as a recruit, as an instructor. If you're willing to learn from someone who spent 3 days watching you fail to see what was right in front of you, we'd be honored, ma'am, Bella said. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive training. Elena ran them through obstacle courses with commentary on efficient technique versus brute force. She taught combat tactics that emphasized reading situations rather than assuming size-determined outcomes. She conducted water drills that proved perfect execution mattered more than raw physical power. And slowly, day by day, she watched them transform. Watched Garrett learn to use leverage instead of relying solely on muscle. Watched Bella apply her detective's observation skills to tactical assessment. Watched Barrett discover that ranch-learned patience translated to operational discipline. Watched Cole channel his grief into determination to honor his brother's memory through excellence. Most importantly, she watched them start assessing each other differently. When new recruits arrived for the next training cycle, these 15 were the first to evaluate based on performance rather than appearance. One morning during a training, Elena arrived early to find Kane at the obstacle course adjusting rope heights. He looked up when she approached. "Commander," he said, "I've been going through 26 years of performance evaluations I wrote, looking for patterns." He pulled out a tablet showing spreadsheets. Female candidates. I rated them on average 15% lower than male candidates with identical performance metrics. 15% for 2 decades. His voice was rough. I thought I was being objective. Thought I was just calling it as I saw it. But the data doesn't lie. I was measuring them against what I expected to see, not what they actually did. Elena studied the spreadsheet. The pattern was undeniable and heartbreaking. "What are you going to do with this?" "I'm submitting it to the IG investigation, and I'm requesting that every candidate I underrated be reevaluated for promotions they should have received." Kane met her eye. "I can't undo 26 years of bias, but I can make sure it's documented, acknowledged, and used to train the next generation of instructors differently." "That takes courage, Master Chief." "No, ma'am. Courage is what you did walking in here knowing we'd dismiss you and doing it anyway." This, he gestured at the tablet, "this is just honesty. Should have found it 26 years ago." The institutional change was slow or harder fought. Inspector General investigations didn't move quickly even with solid evidence. Hardwick's lawyers filed motions, called in political favors, worked every angle to delay and discredit. But the evidence was too strong. Recordings of Hardwick's own words, casualty reports proving women's assessments were correct, witness testimony from operators who'd been there. 4 days before Elena's graduation ceremony, Hardwick made one final desperate move. Elena was in her quarters reviewing training schedules when Captain Foster appeared at her door, face pale. "Commander, you need to see this. Now!" In Foster's office, a television showed cable news. CNN was running a story with a retired Navy admiral sitting across from a sympathetic interviewer. "Major General Hardwick is an American hero being crucified by political correctness," the admiral was saying. "This whole investigation is based on the testimony of one bitter officer who couldn't handle that women sometimes make mistakes in combat assessments. Lieutenant Garrett was a fine officer, but she misread the intelligence in Iraq. That's tragic, but it's not criminal." And the screen cut to file footage, Rachel Garrett's official Navy photo, then a photo of Elena in dress whites, then a photo of her mother's grave at Arlington with the equipment failure cause of death. The interviewer's voice, "So you're saying Commander Cross is lying about her mother's death to pursue a vendetta?" "I'm saying she's been manipulated by people with political agendas." Foster muted the television. "It gets worse. Senator Bradford is calling for congressional hearings. He's got 3 retired generals willing to testify that Hardwick's record is exemplary and that this investigation is politically motivated character assassination." Elena felt rage building. Hardwick was trying to turn this into a political circus. Then her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Commander Cross, I'm Major Catherine Walsh's sister. Katie died in Syria 2018 when Hardwick overrode her mortar position intel. I just watched that CNN interview. I'm calling every military family organization I know. Hardwick wants a PR war. We'll give him one. Jennifer Walsh." Another text, different number. "Lieutenant CM Dr. Jessica Reeves was my wife. Iraq 2015. Hardwick got her killed. I have her final report warning about the IED network. I'm releasing it to the press tomorrow." Tells David Reeves. Another, Captain Sarah Brennan was my daughter. I have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Count me in. Patricia Brennan. Within an hour, Elena had texts from 11 military families. The people Hardwick had tried to silence with classifications and cover-ups and the weight of his rank. They were done being silent. Foster watched Elena's phone light up with message after message. "He made a mistake going public," Foster said quietly. "He thought shame would work. He forgot about the families." Elena looked at the television at Hardwick's allies trying to rewrite history. "Let them have their congressional hearings. We'll bring the families. We'll bring the evidence. We'll bring the truth." 6 weeks after Elena's rescue of the fishing vessel crew, formal charges were filed. Evidence, tampering, obstruction of justice, negligent homicide under UCMJ, Article 134. Hardwick was stripped of his command pending court-martial. Senator Bradford tried to intervene, held hearings claiming political witch hunt. But the military families rallied. Sarah Brennan's husband testified. Rachel Garrett's service record was declassified, showing her correct assessment of VX weapons. The 3 other female officers Donovan had documented their families demanding accountability. The court of public opinion shifted faster than military justice. By the time Hardwick's court-martial convened, he'd already lost the narrative war. The day of graduation for Elena's recruit class dawned clear and bright. 15 candidates stood in formation, having survived the complete training pipeline. Not the 25 who'd started, not even the 18 who'd made it past the first week, but 15 who'd pushed through everything the program could throw at them and emerged stronger. Admiral Bennett stood at the podium dressed white's brilliant in California sun. Behind him, witness to transformation. This training class, Bennett began, experienced something unprecedented in this facility's history. They trained alongside someone who could have outshone them at every turn. Someone who possessed skills and experience far beyond what anyone expected based on initial appearance. He paused. Instead of using that advantage to make them look inadequate, Lieutenant Commander Elena Cross lifted them up. She demonstrated that real leadership isn't proving you're the best. It's making everyone around you better. The speech continued with acknowledgments. Kane admitting his initial bias in implementing immediate corrections, Morgan redesigning water assessment protocols, Hayes teaching recognition of professional technique regardless of physical presentation. Then Bennett opened a wooden box revealing new commemorative coins. Seal Trident on one side. On the other, words that would carry Rachel Garrett's legacy forward. Strength serves, RG 1,991 inches. Today we inaugurate the Rachel Garrett Leadership Award, Bennett announced. This award will be given to graduates who demonstrate exceptional performance combined with commitment to team success, who prove that capability comes in forms we might not expect, who lift others up rather than standing on their own achievements. He read the names: Garrett Wolfe, Isabella Stone, Barrett Kane, Cole Bridger. Each stepped forward in turn. Each received their coin from Bennett, then Kane, then Morgan, then finally from Elena herself. She shook each hand, looked each in the eye, saw the people they'd become. Garrett held his coin like it was made of something more precious than metal. Later, he would tell Elena that his grandfather had passed away 3 days after seeing that video call the old man's last words. "You earned it, son. You made us all proud." The coin had arrived at the funeral in Garrett's dress uniform pocket, and it had stayed there through the burial, a reminder that some legacies ended while others were just beginning. After the ceremony, as families gathered and cameras flashed and conversations rose in volume and joy, Senior Chief Thorne found Elena standing slightly apart watching the celebration. He pulled something from his pocket, small, worn smooth by decades of handling. Rachel Garrett's Bud's coin from 1987, when she'd completed training at 19 years old. One side showed her name and class number. The other side showed a hand reaching down to pull another hand up the image, worn nearly smooth from 37 years of carrying. "Your mother carried this through Grenada, Panama Desert Storm," Thorne said quietly. "Every deployment, every mission, every moment when she needed to remember why she did this work. After she died, I kept it, waiting for the right time to pass it forward." He placed it in Elena's hand, closed her fingers around it gently. "Don't keep it forever. Pass it forward when your time comes. That's how we honor the fallen. Not by building monuments that gather dust, but by continuing the work they started. By being better because of them. By making sure their sacrifice meant something." Elena looked down at the coin, felt its weight, imagined her mother's hands holding this same piece of metal through training and combat and everything between. "Thank you, Senior Chief," Elena said, voice thick with emotion she didn't try to hide. "For keeping your promise, for protecting this mission, for believing in her, for believing in me." "That's what warriors do for each other," Thorne replied. "Across generations, across time. We carry each other's burdens until we can pass them forward to someone strong enough to carry them further." He nodded toward the celebration where Garrett was showing his coin to family via video call, clearly proud beyond words. You did more than expose Hardwick's crimes, Thorne said. You changed how those 15 people see capability, how they'll assess others for the rest of their careers, how they'll teach the next generation. That ripple extends further than any investigation or court-martial. That's the real victory. Later, as the sun set and families departed and the base settled into evening quiet, Elena stood alone at her mother's memorial plaque in the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility. They'd installed it that morning, a small bronze plate among dozens of others honoring SEALs who died in service. Lieutenant Rachel Garrett, United States Navy, 1969 to 1991. She was right. Simple words, but they carried weight beyond their brevity. Official recognition that Rachel's assessment had been correct, that she died not from equipment failure, but from command negligence, that her intelligence had been dismissed to her destruction. Elena traced the letters with her fingers. They know now, Mom. They know you were right, and they're going to make sure it means something, that the next woman who sees what others miss gets heard instead of dismissed. That being right matters more than fitting expectations. She pulled out the Bud's coin, held it up to catch the last light of sunset. Then she threaded it onto her dog tag chain where it hung with her commander insignia and her mother's Desert Storm tags. 3 pieces of metal, 3 promises, 1 legacy. She whispered into the gathering darkness. Every day, Mom, I'll make them see, make them listen, make them better, every single day. The sun disappeared below the horizon. Stars emerged overhead, and Elena Cross turned from the memorial and walked toward the future. But she paused at the edge of the parade ground, drawn by voices carrying across the evening air. A new bus had arrived. The next training class 48 hours early for processing. 23 recruits climbing out, stretching, looking around with the mixture of excitement and terror that marked every incoming class. Among them, a woman 5'4", maybe 120 pounds, black hair pulled back in a ponytail, moving with quiet confidence that suggested prior service. Master Chief Kane approached with his clipboard, but his eyes held none of the skepticism that had colored his first encounter with Elena. Welcome to Naval Special Warfare Training, Kane said. What's your name? Hernandez, Master Chief. Maria Hernandez. Prior service. Army Master Chief, 3 years, medic, 2 deployments. Kane made notes without a trace of surprise or doubt. Outstanding. Let's get you properly fitted gear. What size do you need? The question was simple, revolutionary in its simplicity, and Elena, watching from 30 yards away, felt something unlock in her chest that she hadn't realized was still tensed. This was what change looked like. Not dramatic speeches or policy announcements. Just a Master Chief asking a straightforward question, treating capability as the baseline assumption instead of something that had to be proven against appearance-based skepticism. Garrett appeared beside Elena, his graduation coin still in his hand. That's different from how he greeted you. That's the point, Elena said. 3 weeks ago, Kane saw me and assumed I was lost. Today he sees her and assumes she belongs. That's 37 years of progress condensed into one changed question. Do you think she knows? Bella had joined them along with Barrett and Cole. That your mom and you fighting this fight is why she gets a different reception. Probably not, Elena said. And that's okay. The whole point of systemic change is that it becomes the new normal. People don't have to know why the system got better. They just get to benefit from it being better. Cole was watching Hernandez move through the processing line with the same confidence she'd carried off the bus. My brother would have liked seeing this, knowing that the system learned something from what happened to him. He didn't die for nothing, Elena said quietly. None of them did. Rachel, Sarah, Daniel, the 3 other women Hardwick got killed. Their deaths were tragedies. But we're making sure the tragedies meant something. That's all we can do. The 5 of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the new class begin their journey. Somewhere in that group were future failures and future leaders. People who would prove themselves and people who would quit. But now, for the first time in Naval Special Warfare's history, the smallest person in the group wouldn't start from a position of assumed inadequacy. Wouldn't have to prove basic competence before anyone would take them seriously. Wouldn't have to be exceptional just to be seen as adequate. They just have to be capable. And capability, Elena had proven, came in every possible form. Commander Cross, Kane's voice called across the parade ground. He was waving her over. Could use your input on berthing assignments. Elena started walking, aware of the 4 graduates falling into step behind her. Not following exactly, just moving in the same direction toward the same purpose. Behind them, the Pacific continued its endless rhythm, witness to transformation. And tomorrow, when Reveille sounded and the new class began their first full day of training, Maria Hernandez and 22 others would face challenges that would break some and transform others. Standard SEAL prep training, brutal and unforgiving. But for the first time, that training would start from a baseline of assumed capability instead of assumed limitation, would measure performance against potential instead of against appearance, would give everyone the same question Master Chief Kane had asked, "What size do you need?" Not, "Are you sure you belong here?" Not, "Maybe you should try something easier." Just, "What size do you need?" 3 words. Revolutionary in their simplicity. Built on 37 years of buried evidence, 3 days of undercover documentation, 1 emergency rescue that forced truth into the open, and 2 women who refused to let bias bury capability. Rachel Garrett had started it in 1991, being right when no one would listen. Elena Cross had carried it forward in 2028, proving the pattern was systemic and demanding change. And now an entire generation would benefit from a fight that they didn't even know had been fought. That was the real memorial. Not bronze plaques or commemorative coins, though those had their place. The real memorial was Maria Hernandez walking through those gates and being asked a simple question that assumed she belonged. The real memorial was change, and change finally had come. Elena turned back one last time to look at the Pacific, at the endless horizon where sea met sky. The same view her mother had seen during her training, the same ocean that had tested Rachel and tested Elena and would test Maria Hernandez and everyone who came after. The ocean didn't care about human struggles. It just rolled on, eternal and indifferent. But the humans had learned to be better. And that in the end was what strength was for. To serve, to lift, to make sure the next person had an easier path. Not easier training. The training would always be brutal. But an easier path to being seen. To being assessed fairly. To being given the chance to prove capability instead of having to overcome bias first. Strength serves, always, forever, every single day.